بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. Inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, we're going to spend today, as we mentioned yesterday, talking about a map by which we can have an understanding of our Islamic studies. Inshallah ta'ala, I think this is extremely important, and we're going to just mention a few things that are outside of our text, but it relates to our structure. One of the big things that I think is missing in our communities is structured learning. And part of that is because we didn't receive, many of us, our Islamic learning in the classical, traditional Sunni way, which is from student to teacher to student to teacher, with an unbroken chain, with a reliable book, and a sequence of study in each field. So today we're going to read in three sciences, the primary sciences, right? And then I'm going to give you a map of how to go about that in a summarized way. There is details, but I'm going to try to summarize it within a short amount of time so that you can at least have an idea in your mind. And this is how you want to learn whenever you want to go study Islam. So even if you didn't have access to these classes, they came to an end, you have an idea of how to proceed with a next teacher or with another teacher, or with seeking out a teacher. So we mentioned that the primary sciences are three. They are ilm al-aqidah, ilm al-fiqh, and ilm al-tasawwuf. So these are the primary sciences of Islam, which we would know all the time by the first three in our code 3453. These are the sciences by which you actually practice, meaning you have to have the proper belief, then you actually have to do some rules, practical rules, and you have to have a good spiritual state and upright character. Every other science among the sciences of Islam are the tools you need to learn those primary sciences. So the objective is for you to practice those things. So there are tools you need to do that. Those are the other Islamic sciences. Because the other Islamic sciences, uh, as a separate science, it is not the end. It's a means to an end. So, for instance, the Quranic sciences and the Hadith sciences and the sciences of Arabic language, right? There are tools to show you what's the correct belief, to show you how to practice, right? Or give you access to the text that will help you practice, and to help you gain a better spiritual state. So what I mean by that is they're going to guide you to something. If you just study those things alone, your deen would be incomplete. Unless you were at the level of al-ijtihad and you were able to deduce legal rulings on your own, then you would formulate your own structure in that. But since none of us are like that, then it doesn't apply to us. So the first thing you need on your journey is a trustworthy teacher. What do we mean by a trustworthy teacher? That is someone that you have confidence in, that has learned the matters of the religion from a teacher before them in a way that you are comfortable that they understood the religion from an observer standpoint, right? Because, of course, that is relative to who you're talking to. For one person, they may consider someone trustworthy and reliable, and for another one, that person might not meet that criteria to them. So the initial stage is you finding someone who actually learned from others and you trust them. And outwardly, they are good practicing Muslim. And that can simply be when you're really seeking by getting to know that person, by asking that person, how did you acquire knowledge of the religion? And the person can tell you, right? That doesn't require a detailed inspection of someone's life or knowing their entire biography. It is, are you comfortable that this person actually learned from somebody? Right? I'm talking from an observer standpoint. I'm not talking about when we get in more detail. Just from the, like, did you learn? Yes. Okay, so that's one thing. The second is to ensure that that teacher actually learned. You should have reliable books in the sciences that you're studying or the field that you're studying that have been accepted by many Muslims to ensure that that teacher is teaching you what has been conveyed in our tradition. So there are certain books that the scholars around the world, the Sunni scholars, have accepted as trustworthy books that convey the knowledge according to the methodology, the Islamic knowledge, according to the methodology of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So for those who have this book, we ordered it. I want you to go to what page we started? 48? 46.
46.
So if you go to page 46, we're going to just read in Aqidah, in Shafi'i fiqh, because it has all books of fiqh, all madhahib. But since we primarily here are dealing with the Shafi'i madhab, we're going to mention that madhab. And then we're going to mention some texts in Tasawwuf. And this list will give you an idea. It's not exhaustive, and it is the methodology of our teachers that they mentioned. But however, there are other methodologies that are similar and texts that are similar, right? But from this, you'll get an idea what you need to acquire in terms of texts, how many you should be going through when you say you're studying in that science. So, Bismillah, let us start with the science of Al-Aqidah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, apologies in advance if I mess up all these titles.
No, we do not accept.
Okay, Aqidah, creed. Number 1, Aqidat al-A'wam by Sheikh Ahmed Al-Marzuqi, rahimahullah, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him. The work should be memorized and its commentary taught.
So Aqidatul Awam, right? It is the creed for the common people. And it was written by Sheikh Ahmed Marzuki. And it is a poem, which usually the teachers would have the children memorize. And it is all about Al-Aqidah. So it talks about the attributes of Allah, what is obligatory to attribute to Allah, what is permissible to attribute to Allah, what is impossible to attribute to Allah, about the prophets in the same manner, what is obligatory to attribute to the prophets, what is impossible to attribute to the prophets, what is permissible to attribute to the prophets. It tells you about prophethood and the attributes that should be attributed to the prophets. It mentions the prophets in some aspects of as-sam'iyat, those things that the Prophet ﷺ conveyed about the hereafter and the unseen. All that is mentioned in a form of a poem, right? And that poem has several commentaries. So usually you would learn the poem and the teacher would read the commentaries that were written by such scholars as Sheikh Muhammad Nawawi al-Jawi and Sheikh Muhammad Alawi al-Maliki. He wrote a commentary. Those two commentaries are usually the main commentaries that scholars mention about this book. So with this text, then person would have an overview of the Islamic tenets of faith. Then after that, the teacher would move you to another text that would give more details to that text. So the second text would be
Number 2, Durus at Tawheed by Habib Muhammad ibn Salim ibn Hafid, rahimahullah. May Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him.
This is a book, small text, that is similar to Aqidatul Awam, but it's studied in Hadramaut, Durus at Tawheed, Lessons in Divine Unity by the father of Habib Umar, Habib Muhammad bin Salim bin Hafid. And it has similar to what is mentioned in Aqidatul Awam, but it's much smaller. Mm.
Number
So,
3.
so what you will notice that there will be a reinforcement of what preceded it. Mm.
Number 3. Aqidat al-Islam by Imam Abdullah al-Haddad,
And
rahimahullah.
in these books, though they may have similar content, it is also for the barakah of the author. Like reading the books from certain authors as a confirmation of other books and the barakah from the author itself. And both of these books uh, are written with commentaries. So usually you'll read the book and the commentary with your teacher. Mm.
Number 4. Jawharat to Tawheed by Imam Ibrahim al-Laqani. Laqani.
Which is also a bigger poem, and it is probably the most famous poem written in Aqidah according to the Ash'ari school. So when you want to learn, anyone who studies Sunni theology in our time, their studies, we don't consider it complete if they didn't study this book. Meaning, not saying they don't know, but this is like a standard Sunni text, right? That one should study in Aqidah. The ones preceding it may be regional books, but Jawharat al-Tawheed is studied everywhere. No matter where you go, and someone who is a Sunni teacher, especially Ash'ari, you're going to find that in your curriculum with its commentaries. And there are many commentaries. The most famous by Imam Al-Bajuri, uh, rahimahullah, the famous Sheikh of Islam in Egypt. His text is usually the one that is most studied in the creed. Another text that is not mentioned here, but is famous and is studied around the world is Al-Aqidah Tahawiyah with its commentaries. And that what you could say would be the Sunni version of the Salafi creed, right? And when I mean the Salafi creed, I mean the real Salaf, not the modern group that calls themselves by that name. Then in Ash'ari Aqidah, one would study Jawharat al-Tawheed. And then in Al-Maturidi Madhab, one would study Al-Aqaid al-Nasafiyya with its commentaries. So those three books you will find in the curriculum also of those who study the creed. So at Tahawiyah, they would study first, then Al-Aqaid al-Nasafiyya with its commentary, and maybe later they would study Al-Jawhara. Or some would skip, they would go the other way, they would study At-Tahawiyah, they would study Al-Jawhara, and then, because they're Ash'ari, and then later they would study Al-Aqaid al-Nasafiyya. But these books are common books that are studied among Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And also, the books of Imam As-Sanusi, especially his book Al-Barahim, it is a famous book in the science of Aqidah that is studied. So as a Sunni, if you never heard of these books or ever studied them, most likely you have been afflicted with some default bad creed. And you should go to someone who can teach you these books. So let's move to Al-Fiqh. So that's in creed. So you want to find a teacher that has studied one or many of these books. We're on page 40. We're not in this book, we're in another book. We're in this text. We're on page 46, moving to page 48. So that as far as Aqidah. Then move to Al-Fiqh. And Al-Fiqh, we can talk about all al-madhahib, the four schools, right? But we're just going to concentrate on the Shafi'i school for the point. The same concept is in every other school, but we're just talking about the Shafi'i school right now. Bismillah.
فقه شافعي فقه. Number 1 الرسالة الجامعة by Imam Ahmed ibn Zayn al-Habashi rahimahullah,
Which we've already studied. And that is a small text that deals with small basic parts of Aqidah, an introduction, the obligatory parts of the acts of worship, and the sins of the obligations of the heart and sins of the heart and other bodily organs. It is the first text that you study in the Hadrami curriculum of Shafi'i fiqh, which this is a reflection of, right? So you start with that book. And it's a book that we always read over and over and over, especially for one dua in the introduction of that text, where the author says, "Man arafaha wa amila biha narju min Allah ta'ala an yakun min ahli al-ilmi zahiran wa batina." That the author says, whoever learns them and acts according to them, the lessons, the rules in this book, we pray from Allah to Allah Ta'ala that this person would be of the people of knowledge inwardly and outwardly. And that dua from Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi radiallahu ta'ala anhu is a sought after dua. So even the great scholars, they started with this book, right? And I remember one of my teachers, we were with one of the people from Asada, Al-Ba'alawi, and he gave the Sheikh Risalat al-Jamia. To me, that was a big indication for me. Like, this is a book of opening, right? And it is translated in English by the Encompassing Epistle, and there is another translation called The Essentials of Islam. So that is the first book one would start with, which would give one an introduction. And we already covered that book, and we'll cover it again. The next book, which is the book we're in now.
Number 2 Safinatun Najah by Sheikh Salim al-Hadrami rahimahullah,
Which is similar on the format of Risalat al-Jamia, except it is just stops with al-fiqh. It doesn't go into the obligations of the heart or the sins of the heart or the limbs. This book is more detailed in terms of al-fiqh, and in such that it adds on beyond the basic obligations and conditions and invalidators, like in Risalat al-Jamia. So it takes it to another level. And as you'll notice, those who study both, you'll see how it starts to add issues that were not mentioned in Risalat al-Jamia, so that one would go step by step. Then one would move to the next book.
Number 3 Al-Muqaddimah al-Hadramiyah by Sheikh Abdullah ibn Abdul Rahman ba Fadl.
Sheikh Abdullah bin Abdul Rahman ba Fadl, he wrote 2 books in al-fiqh. This one, Al-Muqaddimatul Hadramiyah, which is famous, and it is kind of detailed, right? But he has a small one that also we read before this one, in between Safinat al-Najah and Al-Muqaddimat al-Hadramiyah. He has a book called Al-Muqtasar al-Saghir, or some call it Al-Muqtasar Latif, which is usually read in between these two books. So the small summary he wrote would be read, and then Al-Muqaddimat al-Hadramiyah is the big summary. So one would read that and then that. But in this case, he just mentioned Al-Muqaddimat al-Hadramiyah, and that has its commentaries that are read. So there's two major commentaries that are read with this book. So you have this book and its two commentaries. But now, once you get up to here, you're starting to get more and more details into al-fiqh, right?
Number 4, متن الغاية والتقريب بقاضي أبو سجى الإسبهاني رحمه الله.
In this book, it's a summary that's going to cover all the chapters of al-fiqh. So the previous books, they're just slowly, gradually adding more and more and more till you get to this text where every single chapter of al-fiqh, every subject of al-fiqh is going to be covered in a summarized way. So usually for the advanced student, when they're starting fiqh, the teachers would start them here. So say if one didn't go through all of this curriculum, some teachers would start right here and just cover it, the text first, then adding commentaries and marginal notes later. So all of these would be studied like that. And the last two.
Number 5, منظومة al-Zubad by Imam Ibn Raslan and its various commentaries.
Which is a poem of around 1,000 lines in Shafi'i fiqh. So it's those rules of al-fiqh, but in the form of a poem. So many of the scholars would have their students memorize the poem. And whenever they would study other books, they would always mention the lines from Az-Zubad relating to those things, right? So it would be, this poem is a way of reinforcing those rules in your mind. So whenever you're teaching, you have those lines of poetry with other books that would be explaining the detailed rules. Also,
Al-Yaqut al-Nafis by Habib Ahmed ibn Umar al-Shatiri. Shatiri. All right.
Yeah, which is a book that is studied in the Hadrami curriculum, and it has a commentary too that is very huge, but it's written to deal with a lot of modern issues, and it has a context because it was not an old book, it was recent, recent, within the last 150 years. So it's like written, and it deals with some modern cases as well.
Number 6, Umdatul Salik wa Uddatul Nasik by Imam Ibn al-Naqib.
Which is the reliance of the traveler, right? And the reliance of the traveler now would be considered an intermediate book. So all the books that preceded, from Matan al-Ghaya wa Taqrib, Matan Abi Suja'a, is considered a beginner's book. Then Az-Zubad, Umdat al-Salik, you're going to the intermediate level. After that, you would go to Minhaj al-Talibin by Imam Al-Nawawi. That is a standard Shafi'i curriculum. So when one says I'm Shafi'i, one should have studied these books, became familiar with them, and have a sort of strong grasp of the cases mentioned. Without embodying all this information, one is not a Shafi'i. One wants to be a Shafi'i, and one aspires to be a Shafi'i. But without all of that, we don't consider you a Shafi'i. And likewise is the case in the other schools, right? If you didn't go through this curriculum, they're not going to consider you as, sort of say, enrolled in the school. You're aspiring to be in the school. But this will give you an example of what you need to study. And these books are books that are accepted all around the world. So if you study these books, it is in English, but it's a horrible translation. I wouldn't even waste my time getting it. Inshallah, the Minhaj, one day someone will do a good translation. The translation that's available is by the Orientalists, and it's horrible. So let's take the last one, which is on page what?
Page 54.
Which is Tasawwuf.
The prophetic biography or good character and
Good
spiritual?
character and spiritual wayfaring.
Good
Yes,
character and
spiritual wayfaring.
spiritual wayfaring.
So this is related to a Tasawwuf, right?
Number 1, students should begin with The Glorious Treasure by Al-Habib Omar ibn Hafid. Hafid, sorry. This book should be memorized and acted upon.
And it's a small book. It beginners tells you about different dua you can do, some rules of the prayer, some attributes, characteristics. It's a small text just to get a person started.
Number 2, The Beginning of Guidance by Imam Al-Ghazali.
Bidayat al-Hidayah is a famous book by Imam Al-Ghazali, and we studied it several times here.
Number 3, Mutual Reminding and Good Manners by Imam Abdullah al-Haddad.
Right. And Adab al-Suluk al-Murid, we studied it here as well. These books are all books about the spiritual path and the characteristics of the wayfarer and the spiritual guide.
Number 4, The Book of Assistance by Imam Abdullah al-Haddad.
Which is a manual that all of us should have and should be read daily, a section to section to section to section, until actually we become the Book of Assistance. Because that book, if read and studied well and implemented, will guide one to the doors of ma'rifah, of realization, inshallah.
Number 5, The Path of the Worshipful Servants by Imam Al-Ghazali.
Minhaj al-Abidin by Imam Al-Ghazali, which we started, and inshallah we will return to it again, which is the last book that Imam Al-Ghazali wrote on the spiritual path.
Number 5, Al-Wa'rif Al-Ma'arif, I totally messed that up, sorry, by Imam Ash-Shahrawadi. So sorry.
Shahrawardi.
Shahwardi, sorry.
Shahrawardi. Okay, look, don't worry, it's all good. These books are among the early major books of Tasawwuf. So you have this one, Awarif al-Ma'arif. You have Qut al-Qulub by Abu Talib al-Makki. You have Al-Risala al-Kushayriyah by Imam al-Kushayri, and the Ihya al-Imam al-Ghazali. Those 4 books, along with the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah, are the major books in Tasawwuf. So all the books preceding them are like introductory books that builds the student up to the major books. And those major books are 5. So you have Al-Risalatu Kushayriyah of Imam al-Kushayri, his Risala. You have قوت القلوب by Abu Talib al-Makki, uh, Awarif al-Ma'arif, السهروردي, إحياء علوم الدين for Imam Al-Ghazali, and Al-Hikam of Ibn Ata'Allah. Right? Those 5 books are the standard books in Tasawwuf, along with the books of Sidi Ahmad Zarruq that are studied, like Qawaid fi Tasawwuf and things like that. All these books are the standard Sunni texts for studying the science of Tasawwuf. So even if you have a sheikh, those books can be like guides for you to knowing that the way you're following is correct. They are like standard books. Fadlul Karim's translation is very bad, but there is one that we've been using as a summary. It's pretty good as a summary. That was summarized by Sheikh Saleh Shami and is translated in English. Is a summary of Ihya Ulumuddin. There is one by Darul Kutub al-Ilmiya, which is a little better than the Fadlul Karim translation. But so far, we don't have a full, complete, good translation of the Ihya. So now, with all that, so that gives you can see kind of a full curriculum in those sciences. In every other science, it is the same thing. In every other science, so in Ulum al-Quran, in Hadith, in Arabic language, in Sirah, and every other science, the books have this type of sequence of study. So whenever you study, you should be going through like that. You should be looking for that type of curriculum with your teachers. Now, this stuff is not done overnight. It's years of study, right? But even if you don't go through the whole entire, every book, you should have some of this sequence in your studies. The other matter is each of those books should be read a minimum of 3 times. Each of those books should be read a minimum of 3 times. At least once with your teacher, and maybe another time with another teacher sometimes, because if you're in the circles of knowledge, you're going to find different teachers teaching those books. So you may read it with one teacher and study it with another teacher, the same book, and at least reading it on your own as a review. That is my recommendation for anyone who wants to seriously learn Islam properly. That's my roadmap for you. And inshallah, we're going to October the 22nd, I think. We're going to have a complete lessons at Masjid Muhammad, an all-day session, full day, maybe 6-7 hours, in covering this book, because it has many fawaid, many benefits in it for the one who is seeking knowledge. So look forward to that. I'll put the flyer out when we finish it, but we're looking to do a complete study of this book on Saturday, October the 22nd. I think that is right. Am I right? Yes. Yeah, Saturday, October the 22nd. We're still We're still working out the details, so I'm really not sure. We're working out the details, but we used to have gatherings every month in the masjid, so we're starting as so we're going back to that. The Shama'il of Imam al-Tirmidhi relates to the character and attributes of the Prophet ﷺ. So that is a book that's studied in that field. So when you're studying in the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, the Shama'il, excuse me, will come in that subject matter. But what we were talking about was just areas of study. So, like, for instance, I think people don't realize that when you study in sciences, right? So there are different fields of study. You don't always study in one subject, right? And you need to know what books relate to what subject. So you have Quranic sciences, for instance, right? Sciences of the Quran, its recitation. You have narration of hadith, there's books for that. Hadith sciences, there's book for that. Al-fiqh, there's books for that in every madhab. Usul al-fiqh, the books of usul in different madhahib. You have seerah, you have at-tasawwuf, you have different books in grammar and Arabic language, different sciences, right? And in all of those sciences, they're separate, not just one thing. So you need to have, like, a real student is going to have at minimum 9 different subjects they're going to study and books in each of those subjects. And it can be more. I'm just talking about as a general rule. You're going to have different subjects. And a person may be strong in some subjects and weak in others, like in everything else, right? No, the Shamal is not a book of tasawwuf. The Shama'il is this characters and conduct and merits of the description of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not considered a book of tasawwuf. No one studies tasawwuf and says, I'm going to study the Shama'il. When they're learning about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and seerah material, and that's when they're going to study that. The tasawwuf books are the books I mentioned. So, inshallah, I hope that was of some benefit to you. It is beneficial for the one who wants to know, how do I study? Now, this is a big problem. Like what Abdurrahim mentioned, I'm pleased to hear you say that because I be bouncing from science to science every day. This is not good. What you're going to end up with if you keep doing that, a whole lot of nothing. You need to be focused. In this, you can't do everything. Forget about it. You can't. So you need to focus on one thing, get some mastery in that, then at least go level to level and complete books. That's why I gave you these books. So if you're going to study something, at least have an idea what books is studied in the field and finish one book, preferably with a teacher, right? This idea of not studying with teachers is no good. Trust me, it doesn't work. You're going to be mixing things up that don't belong with each other. It's going to be a mess, right? You need a teacher. And when I say you need a teacher, even if you ain't with them every day, you need someone to guide you in your studies. Especially today, with the abundance of information that comes to you, right? And now it's like being a kid in a candy store. You just like, I want some of that. I want some of that. You can't be like that in studying. You won't get far, right? So if my advice to you in this, even if you don't have a teacher, don't move. First, I gave you an idea. There's books and sciences. Whenever you're studying a book, first figure out what you need. What do I need? You need to learn your obligations first. So what books are going to teach me my obligations? Let me study those books. Then what else do I need? I need to make sure I have a good character. So I'm going to read certain books in the field of tasawwuf. Then if I'm going to the next level, I want to become stronger in this. So I might need some tools. Then I'm going to learn some secondary sciences, right? Like have a structure in your learning. Don't just be all over the place. And that's what we do here. That's why we have books we're studying. All those books we're studying are designed to give you what you need, right? The the books that I mentioned are at different levels. All of the beginner level books are for common people. And hopefully the common person the layman will become a student of knowledge, or at least in the study. Even if you're not a student of knowledge, you're still studying, right? So you still need those books. So the curriculum is for everybody. Just some are going to be more advanced because they're actually students of knowledge and seeking to become more knowledgeable. And then some, they're going to get a certain level where they have their obligations, and then they may read those other books for the blessing or for extra knowledge, but they're not really trying to be a student of knowledge. Most of us are not interested in being students of knowledge. We're interested in learning our deen the proper way so we can't be misled. So for us, there's not a time limit for that. For that curriculum, we could do all our life. When a teacher is teaching, we may sit in the class and listen, right? So if a teacher is teaching a book, we may just sit in and listen. We're not actively really in the class. We're there, we're listening, we're learning, and we get what we can. Whereas a student is memorizing and doing all that stuff. We're not doing all that. But we still benefit. Khadijah, you're a trip. I told you where to start at the beginning with a teacher. What part you missed? Start at the beginning with a teacher. And I told you the first book. I'm just giving you a map so you know where to go next. After you finish this, after you finish this. So, for instance, we are here. Where's the next book we're going to go to? I told you, right? We're going to go from this book to another book, right? That's a curriculum. That's a focus. We learned this book in Akida. We should learn this book. We're going to learn that book. It's simple. It's not complicated. I gave you a whole map just so you can follow a way to go. So when you go to college, they got all the courses laid out. But for you, you're going to start at what? 101, right? That's where you start. You follow my point? Is that clear? So And all what I read book 1, right? Then we said book 2, book 3 in every field. So it's similar like that. But for you, for most of you, you have it right here. We're teaching you. So just follow what we're doing. And then we'll take you through that course as we go along. Right? But if you say you lost me, no one's guaranteed to live forever. You have an idea of what you need to do, right? And then keep in mind, so keep in mind, you're going to, I'm not saying get all the books right now because you have stuff that we're studying. So you have a teacher. I think some of you got confused. Maybe y'all think I'm getting ready to leave you or something. No, listen, I gave you a roadmap so you can have a view of what it looks like, right? That's the only purpose of this. So when you get a map, say you want to go from here to California, as an example, right? So you get a map and it tells you this is how you get to California. You realize you got to start from where you at, right? And you got to take the route from where you begin. So because the map showed you all the way to California, don't trouble yourself with beyond where you're at. You got to go through the whole journey, right? So you got to be where you start at. Start at the beginning. That's where you're at. And then but you're not going to get lost because you know the directions. That's all. Look at it that way. So what I just gave you was a map. Here's the end, here's the beginning, and these things are in the middle. You're at the beginning, so start at the beginning. And then as you travel, if you get in the middle and you somewhere else with different books and different texts that don't have nothing to do with the subject, you know you went off the road somewhere, right? You follow? You already know where the teacher's going. You have an idea. And when you get there, that's where you should be. So for instance, I'm getting ready to make a joke. If you studying with somebody, they teach you Risalatul, this is a joke, right? But you'll get the point. It's a joke and a shot at the same time. You studying with somebody, he said, I'm Shafi'i. He starts you out with a Risalatul Jamia. Then he goes to Safinatul Najah. And then after Safinatul Najah, he gives you Fiqh Sunnah. What you going to automatically realize? Imam Naeem, did you catch that one? He said, wait. I thought we were studying Shafi'i fiqh, right? So did you see that in the curriculum anywhere? Fiqh Sunnah for Shafi'i fiqh? You never saw that in the curriculum. So therefore, you know you off track, right? It's not in no curriculum, but someone's teaching you that. Well, you know you in the wrong train station. You veered off the path. That's our joke. That's our joke, right? So you studying Aqidah. He's teaching you Aqidah Tahawiyah, then this book, Nasafiyah, and then you're reading the books of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. You know you read off the path somewhere, right? You already know, this is not in the curriculum. Where did this one come from? But if you don't know a curriculum, then you won't put anything in your books. Now you got my point? Now is it clear? Yeah, then al-wasatiyya, right? Now you get the point? Is it clear for everyone now by my joke? So this is why I'm mentioning that. And listen, for us, this is a big protection. Seriously, to actually be able to identify what we should be doing, right? And that's in everything, in every science. We have it all laid out. Now, when I say that, in every place you may study, teachers may teach a little bit different, but it's not off the path. It's within the context. So some may add a text here by a contemporary teacher that is the same on the same mode. It happens, right? I can identify from this a Sunni from a mile away. I would tell you this guy is not Sunni. Even though he's saying Sunni, he's not Sunni. And I will be able to tell you where he's going crazy. That's because we learn this way. You identify, like when people just talk, I'd be like, this guy not Sunni. He's a Sunni mixed with some other nonsense. He's not Sunni. No doubt about it. Because we have a standard traditional way that is over 1,000 years old of how we learn as Sunnis, no matter what madhab you follow, right? No matter what, like I'm Sunni, I'm in fiqh, but I have some deviant aqidah, warped tasawwuf. You understand my point? When we learn properly, we identify easy. This has nothing to do with who's the most knowledgeable. It's just knowing what we're doing. Now, in a given field, someone you got a guy talking about something. All you need is the Quran to learn Aqidah. Man, would you stop? This guy's not Sunni. I don't care what he say, right? But you got people telling people that. All you need is the Quran to learn Aqidah. That's insane. No Sunni has ever taught no one that, right? Every Sunni scholar teaches us the books of Aqidah. Every Sunni scholar. No one just says, just read Quran and you'll learn Aqidah. That is foolish. But people tell people that. And then people think these people are Sunni. You got some Sunni stuff. You deviant. No doubt about it. But that's when we know our tradition, right? When we know our tradition, right? When we know our tradition, we know certain stuff's insane. I don't follow no madhab. I follow all the madhabs. And I pick the best. That person's not Sunni. It's insane. I follow all madhahib and I pick the strongest proofs. The one who says that, is not Sunni. We have some tasawwuf, that's some special stuff that no one else has had. Watch out, he's on the road to deviance. We have our books. We have our stuff. We have our tradition. It's well marked out. And then, if you take that to another level, because really, they're the ones who say that, who moves away from our tradition, they're really calling to themselves. Right? And if you don't recognize it because you don't know our tradition, so you won't even realize that person's deviating. There was this big scholar one time. I won't mention his name, right? He was huge. And he was Ahl Sunnah at one point. And he did a lot of work. Then somewhere, he just took a sharp left, hard left, boom. And I remember reading one of his books. And I said, what the heck is this? But it was one of the first ones that I noticed he did it, because he redid all of his books. The original books were written in the Sunni way. Then when he took this hard left turn, I don't know what happened to him. His book started having all this crazy stuff, and he started redoing them. So I'm reading this, I'm like, what the heck? I thought I was like tripping. Then I asked my teacher, I said, what happened? They said, oh, he went crazy. He started to become a Mu'tazili. So he went back and redid all this stuff with this modern, enlightened Mu'tazili thoughts. Then when you read him after, realize, oh, I see where he went left. That's becoming familiar with our tradition. But even that I didn't realize he went that far, just from reading his works, I recognized that, oh, something ain't right here. Right? Some things are mistakes, and then some things are intentional. Because people make mistakes. We're not talking about mistakes. We're talking about you intentionally deviating from the way of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Our religion is protected. That's why chains of narration are important. That's why scholars are important. That's why trustworthy books are important. So you know, this is the thing, especially in our community, we need it. The teacher of my grandson sent me this list of books they are reading. Riyadh al-Salihin, Sharh Ibn Uthaymeen. Yes, that's what I mean by interject. That stuff's all over the place, right? But, so there's a Wahhabi teaching people. That's what you're telling me. The Wahhabi acting like he's Shafi'i, right? This doesn't make sense. A Wahhabi person acting Shafi'i, right? So he may be correct. I wouldn't even in Shafi'i fiqh, I wouldn't trust such a person. In the sense that that influence of their Wahhabi doctrine is going to fall in the madhab, most likely. So if you're studying with them, when you're reading the books, you're going to see the Wahhabi influence inside their explanations. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. Shafi'is are Ash'ari. Shafi'is are Ash'ari. They're not following the Aqidah of Ibn Uthaymeen, which is the Aqidah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, which is the Aqidah of Ibn Taymiyyah. Shafi'is are not following that. Never have and never will. But someone can pretend to separate, like, so a Sunni has as Ash'ari, Maturidi, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. And they follow the way of Tasawwuf. That's a Sunni Muslim. All of them come together. In our time, there's this heavy push of being Athari, Hanbali, and Aqidah. If you mean something different from the Wahhabiyya, we accept. If it is what is called a tafweed. Okay, but that's within the Ash'ari and Maturidi creed, so no need to single it out for some other purpose. You know, that's Sunni Islam, right? That's Sunni Islam. That's our religion. And alhamdulillah, you know, I don't know what to tell you. That's our path. Do y'all realize that? So if someone's talking something different, listen, I ain't saying you're not a Muslim. I'm just saying you're not Ahl Sunnah. I don't know what you're talking about. There's a lot of goofy Sufis walking around. And goofy Sufis, they have goofy Aqidah too. Because they just want to be Tasawwuf, and they don't learn fiqh, they don't learn Aqidah properly. They just into Tasawwuf. And some Charlatan always get them all the time. There is no tasawwuf without pure aqidah and sound fiqh. There is no tasawwuf. Write that up. There is no tasawwuf without pure aqidah and sound fiqh. There is no tasawwuf. You can dhikr and sit with and smell all the incense you want. Without a sound aqidah and sound fiqh, pure aqidah and sound fiqh, you have no tasawwuf. And I don't know who told you start with tasawwuf first. I don't know who lied to you and told you that. Someone who must have wanted some followers. Hey, listen, don't worry, be jahil, don't worry. Just come and kiss my hand and take these dhikr beads and stop. Knock it off. No, I am very hard about that because we get hit the hardest with it. As black folks, we the ones get manipulated the most with that stuff. You know, I've seen multiple times, and not to pick on Africa. Guy come from Africa with some Sufi stuff, and Arabia too, and foreign Pakistan, but I've seen it a lot with the Africans in our community. Dude come, I'm the sheikh, and I'm blah, 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 and he got all this, and next thing you know, everybody all deviant, talking about they Sufis. I've seen it multiple times. Swindlers, over and over again, right? But the people never learned. And let me say another thing about that. Tasawwuf, when not accompanied by sound aqidah and fiqh, became big business. Because people are depressed and people are stressed out. They just want relief. So anything that sounds good is relief. Anything that sounds good is relief. So if I tell you just do these many dhikrs and do this and say this dua and everything will be good, you know, people like that stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah, the sheikh told me to say this 1,000 times and I'm good. How are you good? You're not praying. You're not doing your salat right. You're not making wudu right. You don't even have sound creed. How is that going to help you? Come on, man. I'm telling you, safety relies in sticking to our tradition. You can go out on the whim and try to find you something. It may work for you. I wouldn't rely on it, right? I wouldn't rely on it. You know, all these new ways of doing things, I wouldn't trust it. You know, let me explain this another way real quickly. I'll try to make it quick. When we talk about madhabs, listen to this. Please listen. Very important. When we're talking about madhabs and aqidah or fiqh, even turuk and tasawwuf, you're talking about a madrasa, a school with tens of thousands of scholars and millions of people who have followed this way. Whenever we talk about a madhab, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Ashari, Maturidi. You're talking about tens of thousands of scholars and millions, hundreds of millions of people. Do y'all realize that? Over 1,000 years. I want you to think about that. Whenever you talk about a madhab in Aqidah, Ashari, Maturidi, right? In fiqh, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, in Tasawwuf, Turuk, you're talking about tens of thousands of scholars that were at the highest levels of scholarship, tens of thousands of them, and hundreds of millions of followers who from generation to generation to generation have followed these methodologies. And then you talk about these other things, which are one-man efforts. Even if you're talking about hundreds of men, right? Tens of men. Do you compare that to tens of thousands and hundreds of millions? Do you understand my point? There's no comparison. Not even in accuracy and reevaluation and checking and substantiating and verifying. Do you understand what I'm saying? We talk about in each school, hundreds of millions, which makes up those billions. In each individual school, hundreds of millions, tens of thousands of the top leading scholars in the nation. And you come in with this stuff talking about so-and-so who can't compare to none of them. Don't be fooled. Our religion is protected. You just have to learn our religion. This is not something like Imam Amin made up. This is reality. This is historical facts, right? No one would deny it, but no one is really pressed. You press them, it'd be like you making up your own religion. Press them. You'll see that they made up their own stuff. And just say it. We think we were smarter than the whole ummah. But you know what happened? Deviance became so popular that we don't even recognize as deviance anymore. But that's shaitan, to make evil fair seeming. You actually going against the whole ummah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You're saying the vast majority of the ummah were misguided and didn't know what they were doing. And your sheikh came up with something that no one figured out. And he wasn't at nowhere near the level of our great scholars. That's what's actually being sold to us as a bag of goods. Doesn't make any sense. But somebody got to speak up for us so we don't be misguided. And you got to think about generations to come. Even if we don't have it. That's why I say we got to learn these things. Even if we're not qualified to deliver it, we recognize it and we can warn others against it. But see, they don't know. You don't have nothing to compare it with. So when you're talking about, as people mentioning these specific scholars among the Wahhabiyya movement, they don't have anything to compare it to. That's all they know. So they're not really blameworthy in that. They just don't know. They need to be educated. Like, if that's all you're told, no one never tells you our Sunni tradition, you don't know. So you can, you know, you don't have nothing else. Our job is to stop succumbing to these things and teach so people have options. Can it be said that the Wahhabi movement is more closely related to what was the Zahiri school rather than the Hanbali's madhab? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. It's individual matters you have to consider. Like that's just like too broad to say every Wahhabi is like that because the Wahhabi movement is not one movement. It has branches and it's new, so it's still working itself out. What is the Wahhabi movement? Even among themselves, they haven't defined that clearly yet. So, that's not something, but for us, I just say let's leave all this new stuff off and go back and learn our tradition. That would be my advice. Like, listen, man, I hear you. It's nice in your mind, but this road has been traveled by hundreds of millions of Muslims before me and great scholars before us. It's reached us through them, not through you. So I think we'd be safe. We'd be safe with their mistakes more than your corrections. I mean, history and time has proven that they knew something you didn't know. That's obvious. Because you rely on their works, they don't rely on yours. So that's sufficient enough as an evidence for someone to know. Okay, so I think the point is clear, right? Y'all got me? Was the map giving you some kind of benefit, inshallah ta'ala? Inshallah, we're going to take this afternoon to rest. I'm trying to get over this cold. So tonight's class, we're going to postpone it to next week, inshallah, and give us a chance to rest up, inshallah ta'ala. And we'll see you tomorrow morning, inshallah. Oh, we need two du'as. We need dua for a brother and sister. Their son passed, and they did some good deeds on behalf of their children. They wanted us to make dua for them, for their son, and also for the family. Let's recite Al-Fatiha for their son, and that Allah gives the husband and wife reward for their good deeds on behalf of their son. Bismillah Al-Fatiha. And inshallah, we'll check on Miss Joanne and Farouk. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala make it easy for them and grant them afiyah as well as all of you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.